you have an intro for the King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard review?
Rattlesnake. Rattlesnake.
Not this album. Unless you want to review Flying Microtonal Banana, we might have more to say about that instead. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, Australian psychedelic rock band, is back with their final release of 2017. They dropped their fifth and final album after almost kind of the suspicion that they weren't going to drop anything. I think they kind of waited to the last minute. You and me kind of both thought they were going to drop it on Christmas.
I thought so too.
But yeah, King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard dropped 5 albums last year, starting off with Flying Microtonal Banana, which is a record me and Trevor both really liked how they experimented with microtones, but at the same time still sounded like a traditional King Gizzard and Lizard psychedelic rock album. I really enjoyed it, and I thought more people should mess with microtones. I thought it was a really good concept that was basic, but at the same time doing something that no one's really messed with before. And I was excited to hear some of the more albums. Then we got Murder of the Universe, which is like just a trash can. I hate that record so much. It is just the biggest mess of just layout and spoken word. There's just so many aspects to it I just find annoying, and it just gives me anxiety every time I listen to it. I just hate that record so much. I can't emphasize that enough. I just really despise that record. They followed that up with Sketches of Brunswick Eve, which is a collaboration they did with Mile High Club. Kind of King Gizzard trying out some jazz. In the end, I didn't think it was worth it. I didn't think it needed to exist. The more I hear tracks from that, the more I think it's the most pointless record of 2017. And it could have maybe been something better, but I feel like they used too much of King Gizzard's style. It just seemed like a boring King Gizzard album instead of a jazz album like I think they were trying to go for. They followed that up with Polygon Wonderland, a album they put into the public domain. I thought that was a really cool concept.
I think so too.
And an album I thought was okay. I like tracks on that. I like the title track, Polygon Wonderland.
It wasn't the greatest thing I'd heard all year.
Yeah,
but it was interesting.
It was good. Tracks like Cumberland Castle and The Fourth Color I really liked. It wasn't, I would say, the most interesting album or one of their most interesting albums. I think their best album of last year still is Flying Microtonal Banana. Mm-hmm. There's a reason it was on both of our lists. I was kind of nervous going to this final album because Polygon Wonderland, even though I thought it was good, I thought it was like them almost running out of ideas. I thought that was going to be the final album. And then when I started hearing tracks for this, I was kind of unsure. Not that the tracks I was hearing were that bad, but they just seemed all so different from each other. Beginner's Luck, which is a great single. I really, really enjoyed that track. And I think it's one of the best tracks King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard have ever produced. Talking about this casino and this guy who's losing all his money at the casino. I think it's a really cool track, and I was excited to see if this was going to be more of the concept from the album, but later, the other track released with Beginner's Luck, All Is Known, is straight up just a B-side from Flying Microtonal Banana. Then they released The Last Oasis, which sounds like a B-side from Polygon Wonderland. And then they released Greenhouse Heat Death, which is another B-side from Flying Microtonal Banana. So this album just sounds like B-sides, except for Beginner's Luck. Everything else just sounded like B-sides. It sounded like no original content to this album. That's what made me so worried. We get this album, it finally drops. And honestly, I think that's
exactly what it is. It's an album of B-sides.
It's a B-side album. I think, in all honesty, Beginner's Luck, Down to Sleep, I'm Sleeping In, those are the only tracks where I don't get a sense that they're B-sides. Everything else on this album either sounds like B-sides from Murder of the Universe, B-sides from Flying Microtonal Banana, or B-sides from Polygon Wonderland, or B-sides from Sketches of Brunswick Eve. Nothing on this album's bad. I don't think anything's terrible. I don't think there's anything that really...
No, nothing is the worst thing I've ever heard. Yeah. But I think that some of it... First, I will precede this review by saying I think that placing a whole album out of B-sides as the last album and being like, oh, look, we made it out of 5 albums.
It's like...
That's a bit of a cop-out. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to lie. Every other album on the face of the universe has B-sides, too. Every other album has throwaway tracks. They've got, hooks that didn't make it into a full track, and they all end up on Francis and the Lights' album. But
and then you just get an album that's entirely B-sides, just the really shitty B-sides, and that's Eminem's last album.
Yes, yeah. I mean, every other album has B-sides. Releasing them as a full studio album does not solve the problem of having the B-sides. They should be released as B-sides, not as a full studio album, especially if you promised your fans that you were going to release 5 full albums this year. that doesn't cut it for me. That's such a cop-out. To me, they still only had 4 albums, because Gumboot Soup is basically just a B-sides
collection.
album. I mean, we've said that like 20,000 times in the past 5 minutes. That's essentially what it is. I found some of these tracks to be more enjoyable from some of the albums this year, specifically Sketches and Murder, but there's no flow to it. It's just a bunch of random tracks thrown together in a pot and stirred around. And, well, that's probably where they came up with the name Gumboot Soup, honestly. It's just like a bunch of random stuff thrown in there. But there's just no flow to it, as could be expected. I cannot believe that they thought that they could just throw these all together and then call it a full studio album,
but they don't
not expect it to be scored as such.
My biggest beef is that it's not listed as a B-sides album. If they said, okay,
right. No, that's what
all
I'm saying.
of our other albums have had a gimmick or a concept, but if they're just like, okay, final album, King Gizzard 2017 B-sides, that's what it is. Or they gave it some like Gumboot Soup,
the
B-sides, 2017 B-sides. I'd be fine with it. But
it's not marketed as... That's what I'm saying. Like, it's marketed as a studio album, as the 5th studio album, the 5th fully creative, fully original studio album of 2017 by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. And everybody's like, wow, this is amazing. And they're just like, no, these were just throwaways. Have a great new year. Like, that just really bothers me. Quite honestly, like, I think that they should have at least put some sort of disclaimer, like, this is the 5th album, it's an album of B-sides, and this will count as our 5th album. That's literally all it is. It's just a bunch of throwaway tracks.
That would have worked so well, I feel like. But since, like, I'm going into this, especially starting with Beginner's Luck, because that was the first single I was listening to, expecting new content, when I didn't get it, it just kind of just like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Like, because all these tracks, except for Beginner's Luck and I'm Sleeping In, everything sounds like I've heard this before. It sounds like just, especially releasing 5 albums in 1 year, there's a certain level of fatigue I have for King Gizzard. So I wanted something new. I wanted something fresh. I feel like Polygon Wonderland was able to work enough that I didn't get that fatigue. And for this album, I have King Gizzard fatigue still. And I feel like even though at worst these tracks are meh, this is not, I wouldn't say a bad album, but everything's individual on its own. There's no narrative. Like Polygon Wonderland at least was attempting to build a narrative. Murder of the Universe was attempting to build a narrative. Even Flying Microtono was building elements of narrative. What I was expecting for this is, we're going to figure out what the fuck this flying castle has to do. We're going to figure out what this Lord of Lightning has to play. We're going to figure out why
who is King Gizzard and who is the Lizard Wizard.
Who is this fucking Asian cyborg we keep on hearing about?
They didn't build off of it at all. Like, there was no sort of world building. There was no nothing. And to be completely fair, just because they're B-sides doesn't mean that they're not original content, because they are. No. But it's not a whole new musical concept like we were promised. It's not it didn't follow trend at all. It didn't, it just kind of came out of left field, and I feel like almost scammed or lied to or cheated out of a full album. And I'm not saying that from the King Gizzard super fan that I am, because honestly, I'm not a huge fan of King Gizzard. They're not my favorite band ever, but like, I was still disappointed in some of the stuff they put out this year. I felt almost like lied to, and just really disappointed at the fact that I thought we were going to get some sort of closure. What did this whole album year mean? What did everything, how does it all play together in one King Gizzard universe, if that's what they're going for? But I think that just furthers the point that they just have no idea what they're doing. And that's why like, as far as world building goes and songwriting goes, they just don't know what direction they want to take. And so we just keep getting like random tracks like these that hint at some sort of bigger world, but it never actually delivers on that bigger world.
Here's the thing on this, other than a mention of a desert that we get, and this on the Great Chain of Being, which I'll talk about in a minute, how there is this force that's trying to fight against God. We just get new ideas. We don't get built upon to any previous ideas. Again, no reason why the castle in the air exists. There's no reason why there's this one woman that keeps on popping up. There's no reason for the Asian cyborg. Like, there's still all these like elements that on previous albums I was interested in. I wanted to see how you're gonna tie them together. And this album, they're just like, nope, fuck you. We're not going back to that until next album, maybe, or maybe not at all. Maybe we'll never explain it. It's just kind of
I don't think that they're ever gonna explain it.
it would be nice if you set the shit up. Like, I'm interested in it. You have my attention. Like, I would love to hear more about.
They're not taking the opportunity.
And on this album, it's just a bunch of random narratives.
Throwaways.
They mention water again. They mention this desert, but like, I don't know how anything interplies with anything. If it does, I don't think it really does to begin with, because I feel like these songs were all written in different studio sessions, so there's no really.
They weren't thinking about the same thing.
But what else besides B-sides was this album give you? Beginner's Luck, the opening track, again, a great track about this casino.
Single.
Just a very, very, probably one of my favorite King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard track. I just think it's a
fun.
very fun psychedelic rock track, and I think it really works for it. You get Greenhouse, Heat Death, All Is Known. Again, those just are flying microtonal B-sides. They're not
All Is
bad.
Known reminds me of a final boss track on Guitar Hero. Doesn't it? Like, think about that opening track, and that's like when the devil comes up, and it's like,
Yeah. I just think they're okay. I don't think they're bad or anything, but it's like, we've heard this before. This is like,
it's just the same musical concepts rehashed, essentially.
Again, earlier when we're talking about Jeff Rosenstock, I was talking about a track where it literally sounds like just a pure concentrate of Jeff Rosenstock. That sounds like pure concentrate Flying Microtonal Banana. Like, if some artist was like, here's what Flying Microtonal Banana sounds like, but it's an original track, that's what it is. Down the Sink, even though I really, really like it, it reminds me a lot, production-wise, of Sketches of Burnwood Rings. Yeah. But I think since it's kind of fun, it's kind of playful, they're talking about...
It's definitely more jazzy and funky sounding than other tracks on this on Gumboot Soup.
Yeah,
I like Down the Sink.
I think it works, in its favor. And I think it's one of the tracks that, like, it does sound like a B-side, but I think I'm cool with it, that it's on this album.
Yeah.
I'm Sleeping In. It's just a very hella catchy, just...
I enjoy I'm Sleeping In so much. It's got that amazing pop and bass work going on. Really catchy, like slowed down beat. And it reminds me a lot of an OK Go track, which I really enjoy because OK Go is like one of my favorite bands. So that's just, it's just a really chill, fun track. And it's definitely a different direction than King Gizzard normally goes in. I can't even see them performing this because I'm so used to their normal sound. I'm Sleeping In almost sounds like a different It sounds like an OK Go B-side.
And here's where you get one track I forgot to mention earlier, Superposition.
Oh, Superposition's I like that a lot,
which
too.
They almost have, like, I don't know, I'm not saying Daft Punk is the sole owner of this, but it's very Daft Punk autotune.
That's exactly
like,
what
it sounds
I was
like,
thinking.
it doesn't sound like just like King Gizzard doing autotune, it sounds like Daft Punk doing autotune on a King Gizzard track. And how they're able to match King Gizzard's like regular style with the autotune so well, I don't know. And the fact that it's talking about just like, I think it's like nuclear physics or something, it's just crazy. I just really like that track. Quantum mechanics, that's what I was thinking of. Since it's talking about so many different elements, I think it actually makes a really worthwhile track, and it's like one of the only ones that I feel like could maybe support it like an album, and maybe something they should explore in future, how with these kind of like futuristic vocals over King Gizzard's psychedelic rock sound. I think that would be interesting. Great Chain of Being, which I mentioned earlier, I just like I think it sounds like a Murder of the Universe B-side. I think production-wise, it's just really boring, just experimental rock. I think that's the best way I can describe it. It's just super boring production-wise, but the lyrics talking about the Great Chain of Being, is it like 1500s? That was talked about, I think.
Yeah.
The actual Great Chain of Being. The chain that's been referenced. Basically, this great chain being talked about where God's at the top, angels, men, animals, plants. I think that's how it is. How this one being wants to overthrow the entire Great Chain of Being. And I just like the narrative that they're building. I thought it was cool. It'd be cool if they touched upon it on later albums. But I just thought the songwriting for that was a really cool lyrical moment on this project. Even though the production was so boring, even though I really don't like listening to that track, I do like the lyricism on it. And then finally, The Wheel, which I think...
Wheel in the sky.
Yeah, that. Which kind of serves as King Gizzard saying, hey, we made it, essentially.
Yeah.
We made it. We've done 5 albums. We've somehow made it. We've done it. What's next? We don't know. And that closes it off. I think The Wheel's kind of a letdown. I think I'm Sleeping In would probably have been a
that's
better
a really good
moment.
one.
I think The Wheel is essentially them congratulating themselves if they did it. And I feel like that's kind of, if this album was noteworthy enough, I feel like it would have been okay. But since this song's kind of lackluster, it sounds like a Polygon Wonderland B-side, I don't care for it. It kind of leaves on a sour note. This album, again, worst, it's meh, but there are some really good moments. Again, Beginner's Luck, Superposition, Down the Sink, I'm Sleeping In are all great tracks that I really enjoyed from this record, and some of my favorite cuts I've ever heard from King Gizzard and Wizard Lizard, but they're surrounded by these B-sides that are just boring. They're not bad, there's nothing lyrically or production-wise wrong with them, but I feel like it's just...
They're not interesting.
They're not interesting, and I think that kind of is a sour note for King Gizzard to go out on. I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I think this album overall is a 6. I'm going to leave it there. I wanted more from King Gizzard this year. At least wanted... If this was a B-sides album and listed as so, I probably may have rated it a bit higher. But I think this is just a weird collection of B-sides that don't really flow well together. While there's some really good moments, I wish there was a little bit more to it.
Personally, I gave it a 5 out of 10. No, I'll probably give it a 4.5 out of 10.
Really?
Yeah. I can't say I'm like I said, I can't say I'm a huge fan of King Gizzard. There are like a couple of decent, pleasant sounding tracks on the project. I find it difficult to review B-sides like this because they are essentially the throwaways, and most artists don't want you to hear the throwaways or don't want you to hear the B-sides until the project has been released, and they're like, these are a couple things that didn't make it on the album. I hope you enjoy if you just want to hear more of us. But the fact that I think really just left me on a sour note is that King Gizzard essentially told us at the beginning of the year, or maybe late last year, that they were going to, or late 2016 I mean, they were going to release 5 studio albums, and I was under the impression that each one would be with its own musical concept that was going to be explored, or some sort of gimmick or concept that was going to be explored. And we got 4 of them, but to say that the last like musical concept that they were going to, mess around with or experiment with was to release all their B-sides on one album and try to pass it off as a studio album, that really just left me with a salty taste in my mouth. I was kind of bitter after I heard that, and so there are things that shouldn't count against B-sides that really count against these tracks in particular because it was released as a studio album. And so I have to rate it on the same standards that I would be rating a studio album. Like you said, there are some pretty good tracks on here. Beginner's Luck, like you said, Down the Sink, Superposition, and then my personal favorite, I'm Sleepin' In, which would have been a great closer had it not been for the Wheels, self-congratulating message that was left at the end. Of course, congratulations, King Gizzard. Good job, us, for fooling our fans. And the fans are just eating it up. But, I mean, wouldn't any fan? We ate up Untitled Unmastered like it was candy.
But, like, that was
good
stuff.
That
was actually good. This is just...
It's not as good. Not all B-sides are as good as that.
Yeah.
But I have to hold it to the same standard as I would a studio album. Even I know what it is, but I also know what they released it under. And it kind of forces me to give it a 4.5 out of 10 because the tracks that were good hit, but the tracks that weren't, and that's more than the ones that were, are just poor B-sides.
What was the final ranking of King Gizzard albums in 2017? I think Flying Microtonal Banana, Polygon Wonderland, Gumboot Soup, Sketches, Murder Universe. I think that's the correct order. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that possibly Sketches and Gumboot Soup could be flipped on my list. They're kind of even for me.